Hey. How is everyone doing? Hanging in there? I'm not happy. It's gonna be so hot later this week. I don't know if any of you saw that. It's gonna be like 99 by Thursday. I'm not built for heat. Like I'm more of a cool weather. I'm in the wrong part of the state, I know, but I saw that. I'm like, oh, I don't want the hot weather. Right? I just had to complain for a minute. Now I'm better, right? But we do get a long weekend coming up. So I know as we're like easing into the semester, it's nice to have like an extra day off. So we'll have today and Wednesday, and then we have Monday off. I'll remind you on Wednesday. What we'll do today is we'll keep going on our chapter. We left off kind of talking about the Victorian era. So I have a couple more thoughts, and then I have a film that I'm going to show you today, which I think is a really interesting like documentary about 20th century sexuality. It's really like fascinating to see how far we've come and things like the bicycle, like we were talking about last time, and so on. But before we get there, so we left off here talking about the Victorian era and like very much a time of like people being asexual and everything kind of proper and propriety in a similar like timing, like the if we look kind of similar with the Puritans and the colonies, so we're looking at like early America here, around like 1600, 1700. As we get into our country specific like sexuality ideas, this was a really harsh time. Like the Puritans, if you have read The Crucible, right? My partner's an English teacher in high school, so I always think of The Crucible and like the transgressions for any kind of sexual behavior were so harsh. Things like adultery, so sleeping with somebody else outside of a marriage, you were killed for that, right? Like you were literally put to death for cheating on a partner. Right. This was a very, very like strict period of time. Sex is good and proper in a marriage, but outside of a marriage, like really bad, really forbidden, and very harsh consequences. But at the same time, within a marriage, again, considered good. And like being a good wife and a good husband involved sexuality if it was in the pursuit of a family. So what they did during this time is came up with a revolutionary new idea called bundling. Super silly idea on the surface, but it was very popular at the time. Bundling was a practice that allowed a young man and a young woman who were about to get married to share a bed without having sex with each other, right? As if like they needed help with that, right? Like this was the silliest thought. They would put a board in between the man and woman, and that would deter you completely, as if you couldn't just like hop over the board, right? Or they would put you into a sack, literally sew you into a bag, the man into a bag, so that he wasn't able to have sex with the young woman sleeping next to him. So you could share a bed, which you were about to do as husband and wife, but without the temptation of sex. Older movie, The Patriot, there was a scene of this. I was so excited to find this because you can imagine this is obscure, right? But there's a scene of bundling of what they did. And this was, again, a really common practice, so silly on the surface. It would be so easy to get out of these situations, but ingrained within this culture that you don't have sex before marriage, you don't have sex outside of marriage, right? Or there are very harsh consequences. So it was like a progressive way of allowing you to share a bed while not being tempted to do more, right? I love it in the morning. The follow-up to that in the morning, she has black teeth too from them, probably engaging in some kind of activities throughout the day. But bundling in the Puritans, as we got into like the 1700s and 1800s, a couple of other like progressions here in our country, freedom and slavery, right, played a really big role in the 1700s. The influx of people who were considered slaves at the time in the 1700s led to a lot of legislation and laws forbidding sexuality and marriage among members of different races. A lot of like obviously very entrenched racism of the time, and interesting like things emerging related to like interracial relationships and marriages and so on. In the 19th century, we really got into what we call the medical model of sexuality. We started talking about social hygiene, right? How could we have sexual health for the first time? And you'll see this in the documentary. They have what they call prophylactic stations. And I'll write that up on the board later. But there were these stations that you could go to, typically men would go to after having sex to like wash themselves and clean themselves to reduce the likelihood of getting an STD or an STI, which at the time were called social diseases. So the social hygiene movement was created to try and reduce the likelihood of that. Big thing that emerged as part of like wartime culture in like the 1800s and 1900s. So what I want to do from here, as I mentioned, is I have this documentary. So it's called 20th Century Sexuality. And these are just like a few like bullets to highlight some of the points from it. It is 43 minutes long. Okay, so but I think it's really worth watching. And it's going to show you basically from right around the turn of the century, like 1900s to just about like 1999. It ends with like the development of the internet, right? And like online, like really bad dial-up internet, like it's kind of comical to watch. Yeah. You don't have to. I would just say pay attention. The video will also be on our webpage on Canvas if you like miss something or want to go back and reference it. These are kind of like the big points. So I wouldn't worry about it. Just enjoy. I think it's really interesting. So I'm actually going to play it here. Let me pause this. That film, and they also kind of mentioned, just bring in this. Here we go. And it brings us all the way up to like mid 1990s, right? So then we kind of go from there into our current time to look a little bit more at a few other things. But any like comments or reactions to anything else in the film? Any other like thoughts or comments before I keep going? We have one more like little short documentary about Kinsey next class. And they talk about some kind of similar things. Like it's always so interesting to me, like the different eras that we've gone through to get to where we are today. But all of those things, like all the different wars, our involvement in some of these different movements and revolutions, kind of getting us to our current mentality related to sexuality. And let me pause that here. They talked also about like the media a little bit, right? The role of things like the media in our sexuality, of TV shows and movies and so on. And they showed it slightly in the documentary, but there was a film that came out in 1896, and I won't ask you the year, but I mean, that's a long time ago at this point, 1896, called The Kiss, right? And The Kiss was so scandalous, like people passed out and fainted. As they mentioned in there, they would spend nickel after nickel. I wish it was a nickel to see a movie now, right? Like it's a fortune. The five of us go to a movie and it's like $100, right? But nickel to see this thing, and people would line up over and over and over again. In case you missed it, I want to show you this scandalous film. I think it's just awkward. Like it's incredibly awkward. These two people like sit randomly so like close to each other and then they kiss. But people again fainted. And I want you to compare that in your mind to anything that you would see on like HBO, like Max or Netflix or anything. I always think of Game of Thrones. I don't know why that's like my point of reference between the two. But let me play this for you. This was the clip from this movie that made people faint. Again, it's just awkward, but here, let me play it for you. Okay, it's really brief, but here we go. And it was a silent film.
America has a strain.
We don't want that again. Okay, here it is. Sorry. One more time. Okay, brace yourself. Right, like my wife would be like, back up. Like I can hear it in my head. Like, what are you doing? No, they haven't kissed yet. Not yet. Here it comes. He's preparing the mustache. Here we go. Like talking through it. He talks through the whole kiss, like so awkward, right? That was it. That was it. And people like could not handle it. That is how repressed and how far we've come since then. A critic at the time, right? Okay, this was somebody's review of this. The spectacle of the prolonged pasturing on each other's lips was beastly enough in life size on the stage, but magnified to gargantuan proportions and was absolutely disgusting. That was the review, right? And again, just like the difference between anything that you would see now, right? So fast forward like on what, 130 years or so, but just how far we've come in that time. And the media plays such a big part in sexuality, in normalizing the things that are like acceptable or not. And there's always like big hallmark things that come along that change everything. But we see so much about like access to materials. Playboy was a huge one. The invention of the VCR was a big one. The internet was another one, right? And so we just keep getting these different things over time that change the way we view modern sexuality. What is considered modern and normal? Advertising uses so much sexuality. When we get to the last chapter, we'll look at how do we use sex to sell things. And oftentimes, if you look at ads in magazines, it'll be like a bunch of naked people and there's like no product anywhere in it, but it's for something. Like we have to get your attention through advertising, and we use sex to do that all the time. And then obviously the internet, wireless technology, right? So many things. I read a thing this morning about how they're creating a robot that will carry babies to pregnancy, like full term. Like that's like the new thing they're trying to develop. Speaking of technology, they're trying to create a robot that can carry a fetus from beginning to end, right? So they get rid of the idea of needing like a uterus or a womb to have babies. Like just wild, the technology advances that we have compared to back then, but the media, again, playing a really big part in what is considered like normal and acceptable. Any like thoughts or cons yet?
I will say, I really enjoyed the documentary.
Yeah.
I have like some really good like content in it, but I will say the one thing that I think it kind of did gloss over was that like even though like Margaret Sanger like achieved all these great things and like you know like sexual like birth control in this country like really has like done so many amazing things for our culture.
Yeah.
It did start from like a place of well, it didn't necessarily start, but like it was wrapped up with eugenics like early in the 19th or that 20th century. And it's just like I think that should be acknowledged that even though it did like achieve a lot of really good things, that like eugenics was definitely a part of it. And we do have a history of like eugenics being used to control people in this country.
Sure, and birth control was and is still controversial to this day, right? Like her fight for it to be something that was available wasn't always motivated by all of the most purest intentions, right? She was trying to give women access, but there was a lot of other pieces to it. And it's still something that has emerged again, as now there's a lot of like questions around the availability of different birth control methods and women having the right to choose or not choose, just as she was fighting for almost like 100 years ago, or like 80 years ago at this point. It's wild, right?
And it wasn't always used for good. Like,
right. Sure.
Sterilization.
Yeah. Yeah, and so I think those are important things that, yeah, they don't always bring up all the details, do they? But yeah, it's complicated then and now, right? And I think something that you see a lot, and I mentioned this previously, is the way that like sexuality emerges through history is like it's always forward then backward and forward then backward and forward and backward. Like you see this progression and then a backlash, right? And then a progression and a backlash. And I mean, you could argue that we're kind of, I think, on the backward end at the moment in the terms that we're going backward a little bit on things that have been available and accepted for a long time. There's a movement right now to ban same-sex marriage again. There's movements to ban contraceptives and women's access to birth control. We're kind of in a like backward from a forward that we were in before, right? And so we see that constantly, the back and forth and things being very complicated. A lot of layers to them for sure. Any other thoughts? Yeah.
Over. Like,
yeah,
like
very quickly, right? Yeah.
And they showed the egg blanket. Okay, and then no, the oral sex skin.
Yeah. And they didn't spend a lot of time on that either, right? And so we'll talk a lot about AIDS when we get to STIs or STDs, right? We'll get there. But the AIDS epidemic was massive, right? And a lot what that did for gay rights as well, like just sent them absolutely backward. And the health scares, right? And like the stereotype that it only affects gay men when it can affect anyone, right? Anyone with those 4 fluids we talked about last time, which is all of us, right? So it's wild. There's a lot, right? There's so much information out there. And I think it does a good job of like skimming the surface, but then there are things that we'll get into later, thankfully, to kind of get a little bit more. Right? So one more time, no, just kidding. I don't want to watch them kiss again, so awkward, just right there. Like I like to be close, but that's awkward, right? Like So we're,
I just, sorry.
no, go
I
ahead.
didn't, I forgot to kind of mention this, but it's like, it's kind of weird, kind of seeing like the progression, because like, it's kind of weird kind of seeing like that, like the previous slide, and just like seeing like how it went from like, oh, just hide everything, just no, to like, just the word no, to like, oh, that's really cool. Oh, that's really forward.
Uh-huh. And you see that back and forth, right? Like very open and very repressed, very open and repressed. So next class, what we'll do is we'll move to chapter 2. Chapter 2 is all about sex research. Now, I want you to be thinking about something because we're going to get into groups next class and have you think about it together. But I think if you try and think about it a little bit in your mind between now and then, it will help. So between now and Wednesday, just think about if you could ask questions, if you could study anything related to sexuality, what would you want to know? Okay, now that's huge, right? We're going to narrow it down. But if you were to try and answer a question, anything related to sex, what would you want to know? Maybe come up with a couple of things and just in your mind, bring that with you next class. Do you want to know like what people's orientations are? Do you want to know someone's attitude about gender identities? Do you want to know how often people have sex? Do you want to know if people are using birth control? Whatever it is you would want to know, just in your mind, be thinking about a couple of possible topics. And then we're going to get into groups and kind of break it down a little bit more. But I think if you start thinking about it now, it might help you. If you forget, it's okay. But just try and think about it in the back of your mind between now and Wednesday. And then what I'll do in our last bit here, I'm going to take attendance today and Wednesday and then never again. Okay, so we'll take a minute here. I'm going to do that. I just printed this out right before class. So it should have everyone who was enrolled. If I don't call your name, then I don't have you on the list. So just make sure you check in with me really quickly. And then we might be done a couple of minutes early. We'll be done. And then Wednesday, as I said, we'll start chapter 2. Okay, so let me go through this one more time. If I mess up or if I forgot to mark it, please correct me. All right, here we go. Anna Karen, here. Joey, here. Jasmine, here. Jacob, Victoria, here. Estrella, Stephanie, here. Marv, here. Owen, here. Stratton, here. Deb, here. Evie, here. Joel, here. Asher, here. Sam, here. Cameron, here. Mabry, here. Heidi, here. What was that? Katie. Thank you for telling me. Okay. And Ren, here. And Brendan. Brendan, here. I see you. Got you. All right. If I didn't call your name, come check in with me really quickly. Otherwise, have a wonderful rest of the day, and I'll see you Wednesday for chapter 2.
Okay, see ya.
See you Wednesday. Okay.
Have a nice day.
Bye, you too. Thank you. And I updated your points with the card, so you're all set.
Where is it?
Okay, so you can go in Fountain Hall, and I think that's your best bet, right?
Okay.
If you go in there, all the different like the offices are right in there.
All right.
And keep me posted.
Yeah,
I don't think there's anything I can do, but if there is, let me know.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, I hope they're able to help you with it.
You said
Yeah.